Welcome back to Deal Flow. Ryan Ray here, as always. My guest is a gentleman who I've known. I was doing the math here. Clayton, I guess it's almost about a year now, a little bit over a year, somewhere in there. It's we've known each other. That sound about right?
Yeah, I think so. We started talking, God, I think Lucas and we got on the phone like around February or March last year, and then we started working together in April, I believe. Might have been May, but either or, it's time flies, right?
Yeah, I know, right? Well, give a quick introduction to those who don't know who you are and what you do, and let's get into it.
Absolutely, yeah. Clayton Stiver with at Astra Equity, managing partner. My partner and we help business owners sell their company. We typically focus on companies that are doing north of 2 million in profitability. They're usually family or founder owned still, so they haven't gone to an institutional or have sold to another buyer per se, such as a strategic. We we focus on companies that are in the United States, and we also focus in most industries, except we don't really focus in SaaS.
Mm.
So that's kind of what we do. We're big believers in running processes for our clients. We try to avoid clients that are only wanting to talk with one or two buyers. We think if that's the case, they should probably just do it on their own, but happy to answer their questions as they, do things on their own. Because we've seen it all, so we can kind of help them navigate the waters as they start to do things on their own, if that's the case.
It's
Yeah.
funny you say you try to avoid SaaS. We'll have people call us up and talk about, yeah, and they'll say, well, what do you do? And I'll say, we can't do anything, but if you're going to go after SaaS, we had someone last year come to us. They said they were kind of experiencing SaaS, and SaaS is, and I love SaaS people, but you are crazy. You are crazy people when it comes to valuations, and so we've had people come
Well,
through our doors and like they want to work with us, and they say they're experienced with SaaS, and I don't know what that means, but I say, okay, are you expecting 10x on negative EBITDA when somehow 14 times ARR multipliers, like some kind of, are you expecting something crazy like that? And if they go no, I'm like, okay, you're not ready for SaaS because it's just a bizarro world.
there's just so much to it. I just don't understand. And frankly, I just haven't taken the time to really want to understand because we're so buckled down in some other spaces that we're just good at. So but it is funny. You'll see the valuations, like you said, range from 20x, and then there's one that's 1x, and
Mm-hmm.
some are based on EBITDA and some are based on revenue, and it's like, okay, well.
Yeah.
So I always say, if you really want to understand SaaS, the best thing to do is hop on the phone with like 10, 10 VC guys, 10 private equity guys, and try to get their perspective on how they view it, and then
Mm-hmm.
go from there.
So you mentioned running a
But yeah,
process. No, sorry. You mentioned running a process. I was talking to an owner yesterday who had reached out on LinkedIn, I think. And anyways, we were having a conversation, and they're thinking about selling a couple of years, and they'd seen a post of mine, and just kind of like, hey, are we even close? And I mentioned, okay, well, tell me your numbers, right? Your numbers. And she said her numbers. I said, okay, well, can you have your CPA calculate your EBITDA? And she goes, I don't even know what that term means. And she felt really bad. And so you talk about running a process. Maybe you do a lot of transactions. Maybe for those who are listening, thinking about selling, maybe unpack the reality of kind of where owners are. I think a lot of owners feel like they've been left behind because they don't know all the M&A jargon. But in my experience, like 95% have no idea, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like they don't need to know. Like like it's not necessarily relevant to them. They're making a lot of money, they're happy, but maybe unpack how often you see that owners aren't really up to snuff, and how you guys maybe kind of walk alongside them to kind of get them to understand what is important and how to get those metrics.
yeah, absolutely. So so start with the first question, which will tail into the process side of things. So really kind of helping owners get to where they need to go. So when you're running a process, it can be long, and it can also be short. Processes can manage, they can be 4 to 6 months, they can be 12 to 24 months. It really just depends on the situation, as everything in this market is so subjective. But really the first thing we do when we take on a client is we really try to help them understand the business that they're selling. And a lot of times, I'll get on the phone with a client that's thinking about selling, and I'll ask them some questions, and they really just don't have the answers. So it's like, okay, well, this is why a process would be valuable to you, because the last thing you want to do is, have a third party buyer reach out. They start collecting data, they make an offer based on what you're sharing or what you're telling them. And then when they really start diving into things, they find, okay, this is much messier than we thought. We're going to have to retrade the deal. We're going to have to cut value. We're going to have to restructure transaction in terms of cash or equity or note, however they structure it. And it really can piss a lot of sellers off. And the reality is they just don't know. That's the reason you want to run a process, is because we're going to come in, we're going to really dive into the data that you provide to us. We're going to try to clean your financials up, make it GAAP-based accrual as much as we can. We're going to try to help you understand certain dynamics such as customer concentration, customer retention rates, really understand your sales and marketing programs, just your overall business processes, your management risk. We're going to try to take all that into consideration, because what we want to help you understand is like, hey, if we go to market, here's kind of the valuation range we think we'll see after we, compile all this data, we ran through the numbers, and here's kind of what the net looks like. So, we try to show them, the gross enterprise value minus any rollover equity, minus any debt on the balance sheet, plus any cash on the balance sheet, minus any transaction-related fees, minus any estimated tax liabilities. We really try to help them understand what that true net looks like. And this is probably, you're probably talking 2 to 3 months after signing, with us. For example, I can't discuss with others, but with us at least, we try to get you this data within 2 to 3 months after receiving your data, of course. And then from there, it's really, okay, so is this number acceptable? And if things look acceptable, what we really then have a discussion around is, does it make sense to go to market now, or does it make sense to pause and wait if things aren't acceptable? And it's really up to the business owner to determine at that point. It's their company. They really need to decide what they want to do next. And kind of fast forward to, okay, well, let's say they want to go to market. Well, from there, this is really where a lot of value comes into place, because we're trying to get our clients in front of anywhere from 150 to 300 buyers. It really just depends on the business, on the market, the industry as well. And our goal in reality is to get them north of 15 offers. And the reason we try to do that is because we really want leverage in terms of negotiating, really trying to help them see different transaction structures with different types of buyer groups, whether that's private equity, strategic, family office. They all offer a little uniqueness to the industry. And then from there, really, it's about, once you get an offer, once you sign one, you find a partner you like, then we're going into due diligence, which can range from anywhere, it depends, but anywhere from 60 to 120 days. Some may be shorter, but, you'd have to have really, really clean processes. Everything's very organized or already collected pre-due diligence. So that's kind of a process in general from a high level perspective. And during that, the first 2 to 3 months is really just us trying to make sure everything about the business owner's business is up to snuff and ready for what a buyer wants to see. And then on top of that, the business owners also, we're trying to manage expectations here. And when we can do that appropriately, everything goes smoothly. When we can't, that's when things can get a little, sticky if things don't pan out. But that's I hope that answered your question to a degree.
No, that's fantastic. And so one of the things that we're at my company, Regal Advisors, we're big on is not working with brokers or advisors who just take a listing and they slap it on biz buy sell. No offense to biz buy sell, like they do good work, but like they're actually. And you mentioned the term process. I think this is something that we probably need to unpack. When you say process, what you're not saying is we're going to stick it on a website and hope someone calls. But there are some brokers who do that and they're successful. Their conversion rate's probably pretty low on their deals, but they do move product from time to time, if you will. But that's not what you're referring to, right? So because some people think of an M&A advisor or a broker as someone who just simply collects some data, puts it on a website, and then waits for the phone to ring. But your process, the term process, when you're referring to it, is a lot more active, a lot more proactive, a lot more outbound, if you will, trying to generate the inbound then.
Yes, absolutely. We're very proactive about our process. it's a service. We love what we do, and we want to make sure our clients, we're not just accepting everyone as a client and then pumping them out there in the market. No, that's not the case at all. When we interview our clients, we really want to make sure they're bought in with us as well. The last thing we want to do is take on a client, collect all their data, and then they just don't really have any interest in doing anything, or they're just, not really in it, I guess. The way we look at it is, hey, this is your life's work. We'll take it seriously, right? And so that's what we will do, though. So as kind of going back to everything, yeah, we're very proactive. We don't just blast them on a website. We definitely reach out to the buyers. We definitely try to make a defined buyer list that fits their goals and what we would prefer to recommend as well. So that's why, the first 2 or 3 months of working with us it's more about just working with us, investing their time to really kind of hammer everything out, the business, their mindset, what they want, what they need. It's more than just, hey, you got an email from a buyer that wants to buy your company. It's like, well, no shit, those emails go around 100 times a day. And I guarantee you 90% of the time, those buyers didn't even know they sent you the email, and they're just really trying to get a conversation going and see where it goes from there. And if they can get a great opportunistic deal, they'll take it. But if not, they'll just move on to the next one. So that's why we really believe in the process, though. And frankly, it's about making sure that everything's done appropriately and done correctly. Now, not everything is up to 100% perfect. It's never going to be that way, but we try to get there as best we can.
Yeah, I think what we see is again, I love X or Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days. Um, but I can't stress this enough that that's not reality. Like what you see on there, the way people talk. First off, it's a lot of the professionals are talking, professional people like yourself or people in the space. So they're talking, and so they use professional jargon. When you walk outside that world, I mean, I talk to a lot of owners. I don't know who, I'm sure people talk to more owners than me, but I talk to a lot. I mean, it's just it's what I do every day. And so you talk to enough and you realize that, their concerns, what they understand, how they think about their business is so different. And so that's also part of the problem, I think, with helping owners understand if they want to sell their business, just how hard it is to sell their business. You can do off-market deals, obviously that happens all the time. Um, but I talked to a PE group the other day, and they said, we actually we pay more for off market for broker deals like you would send them, but they're cleaner, and so we'd rather pay more for a cleaner deal than have to look at more deals that aren't clean. And that's kind of a value add that gets lost sometimes in this discussion of should you use a sell side and run a process or not. Is that you mentioned kind of getting things ready, that cleaning it up and getting the sim and the books and all that stuff done, the buyers, especially the sophisticated buyers, actually appreciate that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nice thing about a book is, for the most part, hopefully they can get enough data to be able to make an offer. So kind of going back and forth with the seller is, they don't have to waste as much time or spend as much time doing that. Usually they can get the book, call us, ask a few questions, and then from there, it's really about making a decision moving forward. And usually you can start with an IOI and then push an LI, but yeah, to answer that, that's what they prefer. I would say too, kind of for sellers in general, I think selling a business is, usually it's an accumulation of your thinking, and just kind of really, in my opinion, the nice thing about running a process, I guess, is the sellers don't have to sell, but they can at least take the time to get things organized. For example, I helped my dad sell in his business a while back, and we were going through the process, and he's like, well, what if we can't sell it, or what if things happen? I'm like, well, look at it this way, Dad. I'm like, worst case is you're getting everything organized for when the timing does come, when it maybe makes more sense to sell, and you're kind of getting the business prepared. And whether that takes a couple months or 12 months, in the grand scheme of things, it's a really short time frame in your business life. I mean, you've been in the business for 35 years, you're ready to get rid of it, now is the time. But maybe now is not the time. Maybe it's 2 years from now. So that's the nice thing too, is we can kind of help them get that perspective. Because when they work with us, they don't necessarily have to sell in the next 6 months, at 9 months. They can go through that first 2 to 3 months, really kind of get things up to snuff, see what things look like. And then from there, it's really, okay, hey, actually, it makes more sense to pause, hold off. And we tell clients all the time, if we first talk to them and they're like, hey, I think my EBITDA is 3 million and I'd like to get like a 15 million valuation. We're like, okay, well, let's collect the numbers. Let's look at things and see what we think. And, if there's an example, for example, we're working with one client and he thought he had 3 million. We signed him on and he had about 1.5. And we told him, we're like, hey, like, we think you should wait. You've got a lot of strong things in the works for this year that are, in our opinion, going to make your business much more valuable. He was transitioning from project-based work to service maintenance contracts. And, we gave him the feedback. We ran the analysis for him and, he came back to me. He's like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get out of this thing, ready to get started. So that's kind of where we're at with him. But so that's the example of a process. And then for, another example, we've told clients, hey, maybe you should hold off for a year, maybe hold off for 2 years until you kind of reposition the company in this format. And they've done that. They've taken our advice and they slowly work to get their business at that way. So it's, everyone's different. But that's the nice thing too, is you can get that perspective. So it's not always a guarantee or not always perfect, but it's what we see in the market and based on our experience and just what we've seen, and they can kind of get that perspective.
So I'm guessing the easiest part of the process, and I say easiest is always a relative term, but getting the information, assuming the seller's wanting to work with you and get you information, getting the information, making heads or tails of it might be difficult. Some of the stuff we've seen, like, okay. But what is the most difficult part of the process, not for you, but for the seller? Like, so if you're an owner going, man, I want to sell, but this process thing sounds intimidating. Like, where do you see the sellers struggle the most to decide, or to move forward, or what point in the process does that become a real issue for some sellers?
I would say what I've kind of noticed is most sellers think they have to sell when they get started on a process, which is not the case at all. In fact, in reality, so here's the issue: is a lot of them, they sign up with an advisor, and because they have to sell, and in reality, that's not the case whatsoever. So you can get up, you can sign up with an advisor, you can get started on analyzing the business, which is what you want your advisor to do in the first place. You want them to start reviewing things, help get the business prepped, and at least give you that feedback on whether they think it's the right time or not based on what they're seeing. And from there, that's where the sellers can really take that knowledge and then decide a decision moving forward. But I would say that those are some key things. And then I also think another key aspect that sellers have a tough time with is really just the emotional aspect of going through it all, and then the time investment. You'll find a lot of sellers, especially in the lower middle market, they're working more in the business than they like to admit. So just kind of gathering the data, or being open and getting us what we need is difficult. So that kind of leads into, okay, well, now there's a confidentiality perspective, because do they tell their CPA? Do they tell their accountant? Kind of send us what we need. So that can also be another big issue. The last thing they want is their team finding out that they're selling the business, because it runs a risk that it could create some disruption in the company. So those are kind of the key things I've seen, really, is one, the time investment up front. They think they have to sell, the emotional aspect of doing it, and then potentially confidentiality in terms of when they get started, is their team going to find out? So those are some key things I've seen. There's obviously much more, but those are what we see in general.
Yeah, I think you hit on all the ones that I would say as well. The other one I see, which is kind of the opposite of this, like going through the process, is deciding to start the process. As I see people say, well, I want to sell in 2 or 3 years, I want to sell in a year, I want to sell in 4 years, 5 years, and you know, selling your business. We were kind of picking on the SaaS people earlier, so you get online and you read about these huge oil and gas deals for billions of dollars, or these crazy SaaS unicorns that go for 100x or whatever it might be. And you kind of think that's what selling your business is like. And that's just not the case normally. We can talk about numbers in a minute of what a business might actually sell for. Um, but for most owners, right, keeping their business for another decade is usually going to make them more money than selling it. So you mentioned it's kind of an accumulation of a process of things that, hey, I want to sell for this, and this. But what I find interesting is the sellers who think that they're 2, 3 years out.
3 years
uh,
out.
and in reality, it doesn't take much to shift the market conditions. So you've touched on it a few times about is it the right time to go or not? Put aside burnout, put aside other, monetary exit numbers. How do you guys go about determining whether the market is the right time to sell? Because, Fed's going to raise, Fed's going to close, recession, non-recession. So like, how do you guys, you don't think of the secret sauce, but at a high level, how do you go, yeah, this is a good time to sell or not? And how do you advise someone to think about that as it relates to the market?
It it's re- it's an interesting question because there's a lot of answers to that question. I would say the way we kind of look at it is we really try to help educate our clients, prospects, whatever. Because when we're on the phone with them, they always ask like, "Hey, is this a good time to sell?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I can't answer that for you necessarily." Like, I guess the better question for me, if you're going to ask me a question, is what's the market doing? I can tell you what we're seeing from buyers. For example, a good market right now is residential roofing. Well, 3 years ago it was okay, but now it's really good, and in 3 years it might even be even better. I obviously can't see the future, so I don't know that, but from what we're seeing, it could be. And then, obviously interest rates play a role in things. Liquidity in the market can play a role in things. But overall, if the business is strong and healthy and it's showing really good dynamics, such as, a strong management team, it's growing both revenue and profitability. There's not a whole lot of customer concentration depending on the industry. It maybe the business is ready to sell. Now the next question is the owner ready to sell? So are they mentally prepared to just kind of let things go and partner up with someone else and kind of help take the business hopefully to that next level? So there's a lot of factors that play into it, but usually the first one we start with when we're talking with prospects or clients is, hey, here's what we're seeing in the market. Do you want us to run kind of an analysis or kind of see what things look like if you were to sell your business today? And then kind of help them envision what that would look like from a numbers perspective. And then really, if it makes sense numbers wise, the next question is, okay, what's that look like from a partnership perspective? Who would you want to bring on as a partner for your business? And then really kind of figuring out what would the goals be for you? Would you want to exit? Would you want to help grow this thing? Like, what's that look like? So there's a lot that goes into it, obviously, but we usually start with just trying to help educate our clients and really try to give them the honest answer on, like, this is what we're seeing. So um, that's where we start.
Okay, last question. What's the biggest misconception that sellers have about the term the process or using an M&A advisor, sell side broker, however you want to phrase that? What's the biggest misconception that you see that you kind of have to objection handle or overcome when you first talk to a seller?
What's the biggest objection we have when we first talk with sellers?
No, no, the biggest misconception that sellers have when they first talk to you that you have to kind of overcome, like an objection that maybe that they don't fully understand what you guys do, and you're like, okay, no, this is actually the value we're providing, or whatever it might be. So, like, if you're talking to a seller for the first time, what's the biggest thing?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think the biggest misconception is they think because they have a buyer that all the work's done, which makes me laugh because you can find a buyer. Finding buyers is not difficult. It's everything else that comes with it. It's getting the deal done. It's managing expectations. It's making sure the business is actually presentable. Uh, because sometimes when I talk with prospects, be like, well, we already have like a few buyers. I get emails every day. I'm like, I have no doubt you get emails every day, but finding a buyer for your business is not difficult. The question is, are they actually going to buy your business and make an offer on it? So, and are you able to manage that if if you want to do it on your own. I would say that's one of the bigger, especially lately. But I would say that's one of the bigger misconceptions we always see is because they think they have a buyer that the business is going to get sold whenever, when in reality that's not always the case. So, because I think an advisor is more than just really helping you find a buyer. It's also getting the business ready to sell. It's managing the process. When you could be talking, maybe instead of talking to 5 buyers, you're talking to 100, which is very overwhelming for a business owner when they're also trying to run a business. And then on top of that, it's getting them through due diligence, getting the offers negotiated, understanding the different intricacies of each LOI, and making sure they're compared from an apples to apples perspective. So, and helping the sellers understand that. So there's a lot of things like we help bring to the table. Obviously, finding buyers is probably the main thing, but getting everything else done and complete is, the way I look at it is when we get an LOI signed, we're 50% of the way there for our client. Now it's getting them through due diligence. So if we can get them through due diligence, that's when it really comes, to fruition for our client. Because then at that point, it's like, oh yeah, you pass quality of earnings test. Now it's negotiating purchase agreements, all the legal agreements, and making sure you still want to do it, making sure the buyer still wants your business as you kind of get to the finish line. So,
Okay. All right. Clayton, where can people check you guys out? Website, and we'll link to all that in the show notes, social media, whatever you want to plug or promote.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people just go to our website at astraequity.com, ADASTRA equity.com, or they can just shoot me a text, 913-548-9634. I'm just happy to, talk with them and tell them what we're thinking and what we're seeing in their certain business or industry, and, give them the honest feedback and let them take that and run with it.
Man, give them access to the bat line. I gotta start giving my phone number out if you're gonna make me.
I find the best way. Just always be available, always be accessible. So
there you go. Well, Clayton, thank you so much for your time today.
yeah, absolutely, Ryan. Appreciate it, and always nice talking with you.